this chapter. All right, so we are up to this stuff here. So, all right. So here's how you prepare for an incident. So once you have a security incident, now, of course, you have to say what happened, how did they get in, and you want to know, are they still in their network doing more damage? So your immediate job is containment. Is the fire still spreading? So you first try to stop things from getting worse, and then determine what damage has been done, and then figure out how to secure your enterprise so it won't happen again. And I was just talking to Richard a couple days ago about Cloudflare. This is where I think Cloudflare is the champion. Cloudflare has had like 4 major security incidents I know, and every time they immediately publish a detailed blog saying, here's what happened, here's how it affected the customers, here's exactly why it happened, here's how we're going to fix it so this doesn't happen again. And that's what you have to do. You have to really be able to answer those questions or nobody will trust you. And this is not easy at all. Most companies can't even detect that they've been hacked at all. And if they do get hacked, they don't have any idea how to decide what the damage was or how they got on or how to kick them out. It requires a lot of maturity in your process to be able to answer those questions. So here's some recommendations of how to do this. To prepare your organization, you would have to have things in row, like you're talking about getting compliance. You'd have to have things organized so you actually have records and logs if you want to have any hope of doing this. So you're going to have policies and consider how you use outsourced companies, because you've got your data and services on somebody else's stuff, and very likely they don't really give you the visibility you need to have logs and information about what they're doing with your stuff, and you have to plan for that and cope with it. So these are the assets. Your reputation is affected, and of course you're going to directly lose data, and that data will have perhaps direct monetary value. So you got lots of exposures. You got unpatched systems, disgruntled employees making mistakes, third-party providers. These are your exposures. And you got a lot of threat actors. People can come in from the outside, but most problems come from your trusted employees. Usually your employees making mistakes is the #1 cause of problems, but you also have disgruntled and bribed employees stealing stuff. So you should have policies that limit what people can do and especially how they connect remotely. Like you shouldn't have any exposed RDP to the internet. That's crazy because there's so many flaws in RDP. Now there's Bluekeep, there's an endless series of them. So RDP should always be behind a VPN, or you should use some other protocol like SSH. So here's the big issue. You have outsourced part of your business to another company, and I think this is everybody. Some people outsource their IT to maintain their machines. That's one thing, but almost everybody outsources a lot of things, like cloud providers like Amazon and stuff, where a bunch of things essential to your business are happening elsewhere. And let me mute this. All right. Anyway, and so that is, of course, a big problem. Now, important parts of your businesses are out there, and probably you don't have any way to get what you need, like log files. Service level agreements will be helpful, where they promise to respond to things on some prompt basis. Let me see if there's some way to get this to go away. All right. And all right. And if you have global infrastructure in other nations, now you've really got a challenge. And this book was written before GDPR, which adds another layer of madness to it. But now you might not have the legal right to have information about what's happening with your customers in another country. And you've got time zone issues, and a lot of things are hard to move over a large distance. So anyway, your users, you can talk to them, educate your users about common attacks like phishing, which is a big one, and make sure they know how to respond to something suspicious that happens. You should have a team that deliberately sends out fake phishing emails to them to see if they do the right thing about it, and then educates them. If they click on the wrong link, they really should be trained to not click on the link and to report it to the correct person. And companies, some companies punish them and fire them if they don't do it, and they say it's much better to just have a prize they win if they're the one that actually reports it first or something. And they say that makes them keep an eye on it and try to win the prize by being the first one to report the suspicious email. People have said that's quite effective. But anyway, you have to do something like that. You have to train people so they know what to do. And all right. And they should also know that they shouldn't be installing dangerous things like games and FTP servers and stuff on your network. And that's why we were just talking about this. You need to have central administration, like Active Directory for Windows, or Casper for Mac, or this thing we found for Linux, IPA, free IPA. You need to have something that tells you what they're installing on all their devices, so you know when they're installing rogue applications. All right, I got some Cahoots. in one of my other windows. We don't need that one. There's my cahoots. We are at 3A, which is here. All right. And I should have a place to put the scores. Yep. All right, there comes some people. Only got a few online. I'll wait another few seconds. Ah, there's a good name. Makes a statement. All right. Give it another 5 seconds. All right, I guess that's it. Oh, we even went from 9 down to 8. I'll wait another 5 seconds to see if somebody comes back.
It was 9, right?
It was 9. We had a fatality. You lost your connection? You coming back in?
Yeah, I came back in, but I put
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go before we get down any lower. We've had one fatality already. So, nice. That's life. Okay, system administrator feels abused. This is very common, of course. So what's that?
Tuesday.
That's an exposure. Disgruntled employees. Very common. All right. So what increases responsiveness with outsourced IT? Okay, the service level agreement is what you do. You make them promise something. I know Amazon, for example, if you pay them more, you can get HIPAA compliant services and stuff. Anyway, so that's the main thing. You control them. So what happens if you educate users? All right. They'll be less likely, presumably, to do stupid things like run unauthorized servers, you would like to think. And which situation may make it difficult or impossible to see the logs? That's outsourced services, of course. Now, there are solutions for this. There's Amazon has a bunch of stuff like Guard Dog and stuff, and there are third-party things like Cloud Passage, and there is Sumo Logic, all of which try to address this issue. But anyway, you often don't have the visibility into what's happening on your cloud services that you need. So anyway, I'll record these winners. And the face, I assume, is Caitlin. All right. All right. And WK looks like, it's you. Yep, good, okay. Good. All right. All right, good. So let's go back to here. All right, so you got to prepare your team. And so here's the mission. The mission is, of course, to respond to incidents. You define you have an incident, and then you want to conduct an investigation and determine whether an incident has actually occurred. That's your first job, because many things are reported as security problems, but they aren't really. Like something's wrong with your own laptop, but it's not really spreading through the nation, through the whole company. Then you figure out the damage and scope, what has been harmed and how big is the problem, and now you have to contain the incident. The first issue is to put out the fire so it stops spreading, and then you have to collect and document all the evidence. And that's, like I say, 2 weeks ago, the man from Uber was very informative to me. I didn't know why they really cared about the evidence so much, but they care because you're, of course, going to get sued. And you're going to have evidence to take to court to decide whether what you did was appropriate or not. And
Sam, which one's getting sued?
Every time you have a security incident, you can typically expect to get sued. And the customers will sue you, the government regulatory agencies, everybody and their brother will sue you if you have a significant incident. And then you will need evidence to document exactly what you did and what your defenses were. And so that's the point here. That's why you have to collect all this evidence. Your own legal team will want you to have that evidence. Because normally, until he told me that, the general belief I understood from IR is that you don't really care about the evidence very much, because your only point is to clean up your network. And taking whole hard drive images and all that jazz is just too much bother. But if you're going to have to defend yourself in court, then that kind of evidence will be necessary.
What's going on with the chump right now?
With the chump?
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah, because what's going to get him out of office is the fact that they documented everything.
We'll see. I highly doubt anything's going to get him out of office, but the Democrats would certainly like to. Anyway, so you got to protect privacy rights, of course, and you have to be able to communicate with law enforcement and oversight agencies and all that jazz. And you have to have enough confidentiality of your internal process so that your company doesn't have leaks of half-finished rumors. You have to have a confidentiality until you have carefully prepared statements that go out. That's the plan. And you may have to even have expert testimony in court of your team, although often you outsource that to a real forensic investigator. And of course, you certainly have to have communication with your own management. Your management is going to need to know what they have to do. For example, they probably have to do something that's going to cost money to improve the security, like upgrade their systems, add more firewalls, or change their staff policies or something. So you certainly need to explain this to management.
But you need redundant communications. That's what I've learned.
Well,
because if the guy that you're giving the straight up feed to, he loses his integrity, you need a second channel.
Well, yes, and that's the trouble with the political issue. Yes, if your situation is bad enough that you can't trust the people in authority, then you've got a very touchy situation. And
I'm running into that right now, not only in the tech community, but also with chump.
Yeah, I've been in that situation as well. And the only thing that I found works is to make sure that you copy all the stakeholders, so everybody can see what's going on.
Oh, I see.
It's very difficult. But I've been in positions where you have a worthless manager and I have to permit him to think he's in charge when he isn't, and run around him without obviously throwing him under the bus. It's a touchy political activity to survive a bad manager above you.
But what the Army taught me was redundant. Well, not the Army, but the Signal Corps taught me redundant communications. Yeah,
that's it. You have to tell more than one person. You have to get your orders in writing. Yeah. Anyway, so your legal counsel, if you include your legal counsel on something, even if it is not apparently their business, that makes it not discoverable in court. And that's why you always see these notes on emails. Anything with that note on it does not have to be surrendered when you get sued. When you get sued, the first thing they're going to do is file a discovery order, and the discovery order is going to come to you and say, you must send us all the emails and PDFs and everything about this topic. And if you don't, then you'll be punished brutally. Typically a summary judgment on the other side, getting everything they asked for. So you must hand over everything, but the only exception is attorney-client products. That's privileged and you don't have to produce it. So that's why they want to put this on everything. And the biggest one I know is Google versus Sun. Android phones that Google made are based on Java. And in the early days of developing Android, one of their engineers said, wait a minute, Java is owned by Sun and it's proprietary and we can't use it without paying Sun for it. And they said, shut up, it'll be fine. And it wasn't fine. Sun sued them and demanded, I think, $3 billion of licensing fee for all the Android phones they built. And they tried to suppress that original document. They said, oh, we had no idea that you would make us pay for this. We thought it was fine. And that original document had been marked with this, but one email, someone stripped this off. So the forensic company doing IR made a mistake and forwarded that to the other side. So that email may have cost Google $2 or $3 billion because they didn't keep it confidential. And I think that case is still dragging on. I'm not sure. It might have finished by now. Anyway, so attackers will typically.
What was your point, Sam?
The point, that's the purpose of this, this thing. It's to prevent discovery. And it is a job of the forensic examiner gathering the evidence to be careful and only deliver the evidence that they must deliver. Anyway, so your attackers will typically compromise your email server. This is a big one these days. And therefore, if you continue to send emails around your discovery team, your IR team, you'll be revealing your activities to the attacker. So you have to find an out-of-band channel like cell phones to coordinate things or add encryption to your email. And so you have to watch your conference calls. People will sneak into conference calls that don't belong there, and so on. You can use things like code names for products and stuff, and be careful. This is a big issue. This is what happened in the days of Kevin Mitnick, the first most wanted hacker. He was in charge of the phone network. He hacked the phone network. He listened to the FBI's phone calls planning to arrest him, and he knew where they were going. He knew what was happening even more than they did, so he just made fools of them for a couple of years. So you can get free email certificates. Now, of course, you can get certificates for everything free from the EFF, but these guys have been doing it for a while. So you can have a certificate to encrypt email. And if you're going to send information to external parties, then there are official channels for that you can use. But during an incident, you must understand that all your normal communication channels are compromised, and you're probably handing all that data over to the attacker.
How do you handle out-of-band?
Handle what?
Out-of-band communications.
You just have to find a way that's not monitored. Like typically cell phones, you can assume they probably didn't compromise the cell phone network if they've compromised your company network. Just something totally different like that. And face-to-face meetings are probably fine. It's unlikely that a cyber attacker is actually planting physical bugs in a room. That kind of thing, yeah. But you have to make a judgment depending on your attacker. Now, if you're like a military and you're being attacked by like the Russian GRE or whatever it is, AGV, GRU now, then maybe they are putting bugs in the room. So you'd have to consider whether that's a possibility. But for most attackers, that's not an issue. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So you have to have a lot of reports as you go ahead. You have to have status reports to the stakeholders, like your own managers and somebody that's talking, like your customer relations team that's explaining to your poor customers, what's going on. You have now live responses are from a single system. You're running code on a system and you get evidence to indicate it was compromised. So that's something going into just your IR team. The forensic examination can take a long time, and malware analysis can also take a while. So these are things people are doing, and these would mostly be only internal. And then you'll have an intrusion investigation report, and this may be a final document, which may be distributed more widely, but nothing should leave the company without being vetted by your legal team and passed to your PR team to make sure that you're controlling what goes out. And you can be cynical and say you're controlling it to avoid admitting what you did wrong to cover yourself, but you can also say, on the positive side, you're controlling what goes out so it will help people. Like I said, the fake incident that affected this college several years ago when they claimed the machines were all infected with viruses. They dumped it right in the Chronicle without telling anybody, and people came into work the next day and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know if it's safe to use their machine, it's safe to use their credit card. And that's why you should have a communications team sending useful information out to tell people what they need to know, not just unfounded rumors and leaks of technical documents they won't understand, but a clear answer to the questions that people will ask. So you have to have IR team trained somewhere. There are various colleges that have IR training programs that are pretty famous, and you might be able to be lucky enough to get people that actually had official IR training. That would be nice. Often, the only thing you can find is people with experience. It's very hard to find people that know IR.
Carnegie Mellon had the contract when I was in Signal Corps.
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon is a big leader, and that's why they're ruthless in the cyber competitions too. They've got great teams, and nobody can come within a mile of beating them.
They were kind of cool too.
Oh yeah, they're very good.
I mean, they weren't uptight when they showed up.
Oh no, I don't think so. Yeah, that's good. Let's see, I got a chat message here. Where does a red team pen test Yeah, that's quite separate. Your red teams are people that attack things just to find vulnerabilities. IR is all blue team. It's responding to fix problems. Your red team people might participate to some extent because their skills might be useful, but it's really quite different. Good.
How do you like among those four?
Oh, I don't have enough experience with them. The only ones I've dealt with is the Carnegie Mellon competition team, and they're very impressive. And I've used some tools developed at Carnegie Mellon, and they're very good. They're definitely a huge leader. But SANS is very good too. They do have these classes that are excellent, but they're very expensive. These others I haven't dealt with, so I don't really know.
I didn't deal with the others.
Yeah.
They're just SANS and Carnegie Mellon CNIT.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is SANS?
SANS is a commercial training unit where they try to pay like $5,000 and take a class and get a certificate. That's where all the corporate security people go. They're very good classes.
Military won't pay for them.
Yeah, but they're very expensive. You only want to do it when your boss is paying for it. But they have a whole lot of classes and all the latest security technologies of all different kinds. They're very good, but they're typically out of reach of anybody that would go to this college. So typically people are going here because they don't have much money. Anyway, so then you have a lot of hardware.
The military didn't pay for SANS, but
yeah,
they paid for the Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah. Anyway, so you have to encrypt stuff, of course. You have to have plenty of internal media, encrypted drives to conceal the evidence you're doing, and encrypt your external drives. Microsoft BitLocker, if you want to use Windows, has got BitLocker and BitLocker to go to encrypt things. People used to use TrueCrypt, but TrueCrypt is officially abandoned, but now there's a thing called VeraCrypt that supposedly is the replacement. Anyway, if you're going to go in the field to a location where you're trying to capture evidence, then you need a very powerful machine with fast data because you're going to want to try to make complete images of RAM and hard drives, and that takes a lot of hardware because it's very slow to copy an entire hard drive.
What do you use, Sam, for hardware when you show up on site?
Oh, I haven't done this. I've only talked about it.
Okay.
Yeah, good. It's a good question, but I know people that do it. And they just have lots of stuff. They think nothing of buying $10,000 disk duplicator and all that jazz. That's right. Forensic people that testify in court, they get paid a lot of money and they have a whole pile of expensive equipment.
But do you know what the normal interface is?
Well, you can use any interface you want, but it makes it slow. You can use something like USB, but it would be slow. So if you're just doing it once or twice, then you can do it that way. But if you're a professional, then you pay for expensive, fast machines. It's just to save time is the only reason you need them. But then you need to store all that data, and you need to store it for years, and you need to store it securely. So the forensic investigators I know have a big safe, and they charge customers quite a lot of money just for storage. And you have to store it, even if your customer doesn't think you do, because you can think the case is done, and 3 years later there can be a lawsuit about it, and they're going to need the evidence again. So you have to have piles of this stuff stored for years in a secure location.
What's your...
I think
you've got to keep it forever, right?
Not forever. I think most crimes have a statute of limitations of either 3 years or 7 years. So at that point, you can then safely conclude you don't need it anymore. There are some crimes with no statute of limitation, like murder, but I think most private forensic investigators are not involved in that kind of crime. They're only involved in financial crimes, and financial crimes typically only have a 7-year statute of limitation. But you would have to consult with your legal team to make sure you know what to do. It's a very good point. Anyway, so then you have a dedicated lab. Now you have write blockers. Write blockers are these hardware devices to prevent altering the disk while you're imaging it. And they're pretty expensive, like $300 each, and you have to have ones that can handle every possible connection, especially if you do cell phones, which everybody wants to do. There are about 300 different kinds of connectors used on cell phones. It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, then you have to have lots of clean machines and lots of storage of all these copies. Some people do it in the cloud. I know the FBI uses FTK, and their forensic team just images devices, and then they put it up in the cloud, and the investigators log into the cloud to analyze it. This would seem like a really good solution to me, because your investigators might be all over the place, and they don't want to be driving to some location where you have the image. That would seem like a pretty good solution. I know the NSA and the Department of Defense is also moving to the cloud, and I think it's going to be Amazon Cloud. It's been happening in the last 2 years. They're moving the entire military to the cloud, and they're all going to go with one provider. And it was Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud competing, and I think Amazon won. But it might not be over yet. They were talking about how this one contract was so big.
That's a question. If Amazon gets the contract, I mean, I know you prefer Google
Oh, not particularly.
Is it going to be accepted as a redundant cloud? Or not?
No, they've decided it'll only be one provider, and there's a huge battle about it because this single contract is so big that it would change the balance of the cloud industry. It's like, I think, say 70% of the entire cloud is on this one contract. So if Google was to get it, they would go from like #3 to #2 or something.
It shouldn't be. There shouldn't be a single, monopoly on the cloud.
That's what some people are saying, but the current state of the bidding, as of about a month ago when I read the latest news article, was that they put in the contract it must be only one provider.
Are you worried about that?
No, not really.
Why not?
Oh, I don't bother. It's above my pay grade, that's all. I don't have an intelligent opinion about how good it'll be. I think there will undoubtedly be a lot of problems and they'll cope. But anyway, I know, for example, everything the NSA takes is going in that one facility in Utah, and that's not accessible to other agencies. But
Well, that worries me.
a lot of people are worried about that. But I haven't heard much coming out of it yet. But yeah, they do have everything there. Anyway, so all right, so you got to have a lot of this stuff, write blocking kits, like I say, standalone disk duplication machines are usually what you want to do it fast. I've seen students have brought these and brought them in. And devices for mobile acquisition devices, these things are very expensive from companies like BlackBag and the Israeli company Celebrite that hacked into the iPhone. They can get the data out of anything, but the equipment is expensive. And they have a lot of storage and digital cameras and lots of places to put things and all the usual hardware to take apart laptops and pull out the hard drives and SSDs. And if you go to Drive Savers that does this, Drive Savers was originally to recover data from damaged drives, and they expanded into police forensics. They will actually do legally sound acquisition and analysis, and they will send expert witnesses to court to testify about it, so you can outsource it to them. And they have the very latest technology for everything, and they can even do chip-off forensics for SSD. If you want to get all the bits off an SSD, connecting to a computer is not the right way to do it because SSDs do not let computers see all the data on the drive. You have to take it apart and read the bits one by one off the chips, and they can do that. So it's really very expensive and complex, but they can do the most accurate acquisition of drives if you want them to.
Who's there?
Drive Savers, they're up in Nevada. It's a very good company, and they do this. They do forensic analysis in addition to just data recovery. So if you want to monitor network traffic, you can just monitor it with things like Wireshark, but usually for any enterprise class amount of data, you have to have a server. And so you'll have a pretty powerful server here that's going to have to watch this, and you'll have to have special hardware, like not just a span port in a router, but an actual network tap to keep up with the line speed. And the amount of data is enormous, and this is a big deal for live monitoring, like the kind that we're doing in the projects here where you're analyzing Splunk. You have to have these servers and these taps all over your network to gather all that data, and then you accumulate a vast amount of data. So that's why I said Splunk can easily cost you $20,000 a year for licensing fees, but that's really not a problem. The hardware is going to cost you a lot more. If you have an enterprise class network, you have to have a huge server network to process all this data, and a huge storage network to store all this data.
But Sandy, you don't have any hardware. Everything you've got is up on
Sure. And so none of my stuff is at enterprise
on the
scale.
cloud.
Yeah. So all my stuff is just for classroom projects. It's just one server at a time. But real enterprises have like 10,000 servers that they're monitoring. So it's we're only doing little tests for practice. But real enterprises have to scale everything way up.
Oh, I see.
And we do have a cloud class that touches that. This is a big issue. They use a lot of fancy techniques to handle really big networks, and we don't cover them much. But it would be good to move in that direction as best we can. Anyway, so Security Onion is one of the open source products. I found it to be very painful to use. There's other ones out here. Like I said, the champion is Splunk. Splunk is the most expensive and luxurious, and that's what we're using here. There are other competitors like Logarithm and Sumo Logic that people can use. Security Onion is pretty painful, but it's all free, of course. That's a Linux-based tool on which they're all. So I would say all based. Now you have there's a huge, Encase is the primary offender here. Encase has put in their advertising material that you must use Encase because nothing else will hold up in court, because Encase has been proven in 10,000 lawsuits, and all the police departments mostly use Encase. And they have promulgated a myth that using Encase will mean it'll be accepted in court, and if you use something else, it won't be accepted in court. And that is entirely not true. But it is a popular advertising technique. What happens is you can do anything you want and go to court, because court evidence is humans. The human explaining what they did is the evidence. It's not the tool or the technique. It's the human explaining the technique. An expert witness. See, a normal person in court is only allowed to testify to what they did and what they saw. They cannot talk about anything else. Anything else is hearsay. The one exception is an expert witness. An expert witness is able to turn. What's that?
How does the court know that without a subject matter expert?
Well, that's the issue. An expert witness is the special person who can turn opinions into evidence. Nobody else is allowed to do that. And because
how would the court even know it?
Well, that's this issue.
Does it take a good judge to even understand how to run this court?
No, it's a big issue. The evidence, the expert witness has to present credentials, and both sides then analyze the credentials and decide how much they trust the witness. And they have to be able to impress people that they really are an expert. And if they succeed in doing that, then they will be, then they will convince the jury. So here's the standard for any technique you bring up here. This is the Daubert Standard. Has the technique been empirically tested, published in peer-reviewed journals? And do you know the error rate, and is there general acceptance? This is why things like lie detectors are not accepted. They're considered to fail this test, and astrology and stuff, but other things like fingerprints do pass this test. And until about a year ago, hair samples passed this test, and they were used to put a lot of people in prison. And about a year ago, there was a major study showing that hair samples are useless. You cannot compare hair under a microscope and match it. It's not precise enough, and they removed it from accepted evidence. It's had headlines. This has happened many, many times. Forensic science is very scandalous. There are many cases of forensic scientists that are completely incompetent and totally lie, and go on for years and then get exposed later, unfortunately.
Who's messing with it? The Russians?
They typically do it to give the cops what they want. There was one guy that would just mislabel blood samples and just tell the cops they proved whatever they wanted them to prove.
Fingernails working still?
DNA and fingernails would work. DNA is fine. DNA is accepted. But hair samples without DNA are not typically accepted anymore. And this changes as time passes. They keep changing the rules based on whatever the current interpretation is.
Are they teaching that in law school, or are they not teaching it?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know we do have like at Mission Campus, we do have a forensic team that does like analysis of this kind of sample. The only thing we do here is computer forensics, but it follows the same rules. And there are other things here like is the evidence, does the expert explain this well enough? And is there a measure of consistency, and is there a body of literature? And they often look at your credentials. And this is why teachers are sought after for forensic examiners and witnesses, because the main job here is to explain it to non-technical people. So teachers are valuable there. The problem with teachers is they ramble and go off the topic. And you can't be doing that. You have to give them just the answer to the question and then shut up, because they will say, well, it proves this. But on the other hand, it might be wrong for this reason. They'll say, shut up, shut up, shut up. You were just supposed to stop at saying it proved this. And that's the problem with teachers. They have a good side and a bad side. Yeah. I've not. I was trained, as soon as I started giving public talks about forensics, after I learned it, people offered me court cases. And I said, are you out of your mind? I got no experience. I don't feel qualified. And then I met other forensic teachers that said, don't go to court, they'll tear you to bits. And I said, well,
Why not?
Because they do tear you to bits, of course. And I might be all right.
Don't you get some coin?
Oh, you make a pile of money. The problem is, the only thing you can do easily is work defense. And defense is really sleazy and nasty, because in the first place, they're almost all guilty. So you're pretty much just getting guilty people off. In the second place, they typically have no money to pay you, and they typically betray you and trick you into saying something wrong. So it's really sleazy to work defense. The thing to work is prosecution, but the cops are real hard to get into. Unless you have something like military experience, it is very difficult to convince the cops to trust you. It takes years of, so it's hard to get into forensics. The only way really in is from the military or police background.
Well, I've got 20 years in
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and I'm your friend. So
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be a good way in. That's the thing. Forensics is a very productive field, but you want to be on prosecution. It's much better because then you're right most of the time. And it's, you know, you feel better about it. And inside the police, you got the camaraderie of the police and everything, whereas defense is pretty much a jungle. This is what I've heard. Here's another thing. I'm in the High Tech Crime Investigators Alliance, HTCIA, High Tech Crime Investigators Association, and you can get in there if you have connections with law enforcement or something, but you can never get in if you've ever worked defense for anything. If you ever defended anybody in court, they regard you as on the other side and they'll bar you forever.
I'm on the other side of the street.
What's that?
I'm on the other side.
I know, and you want to.
Because I grew up believing in the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, so if I lose some money, you getting some innocent guy off the hook, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's why. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so there's a lot of software used. There's an independent testing company that'll test the tools and such. There's a lot of Linux systems to image things, many ways to capture hard disks and RAM and so on. And we have the forensic classes here that go into that in quite a bit of detail. What's that?
Some of them don't.
Well, the one here should. Anyway, so live response is the main thing we care about, running scripts on the machine to get certain information. And so there are big tools you use to analyze whole hard drive images like NCase, FTK, and SleuthKit and Autopsy. Those are the big ones. NCase and FTK are expensive. They run on Windows. They are the ones all the professionals use. SleuthKit and Autopsy is the open source alternative, and it is very much less friendly. And if you do cell phones, there are special ones just for cell phones. Blackbag for Macs, and other ones like Internet Evidence Finder from Magnet Forensics. There are a bunch of them. They're typically very, very expensive. But expert witnesses make a pile of money, and they pay for luxurious tools.
What's expensive?
These, I think a case has like 4 levels, and the enterprise license is like $100,000.
$100K?
Yep, and I think it might be like a $20K a year or something.
Can you finance them?
I don't think so. And
no one's got 100K. Even Trump didn't have 100K.
corporations do, and corporations pay for it. And if you pay for the enterprise version, Encase will have a live response. Encase, actually, you can push malware onto a machine, and it will start imaging it over the network. So you can have a suspect in your company, and you can be taking the evidence off their machine while they're using it, and they never know it's happening. That's what you get with the forensic level. The same way bad guys steal stuff, because if you have an internal problem at your company, you probably need to investigate like top executives, and you don't want them to ever know you did it if they're innocent. And that's why you pay for the expensive version of these things. And big corporations do, because they're just constantly investigating stuff, because if you get big enough, like a major ISP or something, you've got thousands of locations, thousands of employees. Yeah, and you have tons of crime going on just all the time. So you just have constant investigations going on of the various things happening. Anyway, so then you have evidence handling.
So
yeah.
The big companies actually finance the cost of the tool themselves?
Oh yeah, big companies have their own forensic team, just like their own legal team, and they're just constantly doing internal investigations because they have constant crime inside the company. And most of it never comes out. Mostly they resolve it inside the company, they find out what's wrong, they just fire somebody, and it never needs to go to court or anything. But the ones that are big external breaches, those they have to report, and those become public. Yeah, and so you have to get positive control here, which means you have to collect the evidence in a controlled environment so you know it's a good copy, and then you need to store it with a hash value so you know exactly what it should be, and you can make copies of it and send it places and verify that it hasn't been altered. That's important, although this is a little bit old-fashioned. This is the old-fashioned forensics, where you would make an image of a hard disk and have one file that's all the data on the hard disk, and then you make copies and it's exactly the same. The problem is most instant response uses live collection of running systems, and that does not give you something. That changes. If you do it again, you'll get a different answer. It's constantly changing, so it's not as clear. But once you have one image, you can make copies of the image, but the image is not a perfect copy. It's just a snapshot in time. So you have to understand that. Of course, the same thing's true of fingerprints and DNA evidence and blood splatters. It's not like a perfect reproducible process. You measure it, you get some evidence, and you have to interpret the evidence, because some of what happens with the evidence is changes put in by the examiner, and some of it is what was actually there, and your examiner has to tell the difference. And that's the same thing true with live response. You have to run code on the machine to get the data, so there is data from your investigating tool, which was not put there by the criminal.
Just like your website.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a snapshot in time.
Yes. And
I've noticed that, and it's good. It's updated and told today.
Yeah, that's right. You have to keep track. So once you get evidence, you have to have records of when you collected it, where it's stored, who's responsible for it, because you store it someplace and somebody has to testify that I made sure it was locked up until I gave it to this person, and then they made sure it was locked up, and you have to have an unbroken chain of custody or it won't be admissible in court.
But here's what I'm thinking, Sam.
Yeah.
If it's updated until today,
yeah,
your crime is pretty much within 24 hours.
Yeah, well, see, a static thing like a website does have one fixed state until there's an update, and that'd be something like GitHub repo, but a running system doesn't. There are processes running, network connections, it's changing constantly. So if you make an image of, say, a running computer that might have malware on it, or an attacker controlling it, that's going to keep changing. There's no perfect time to take the image. And if you make another copy later, it's not exactly the same, that's all.
But what is the law want?
Well, all the law cares is that somebody has to appear in court and they have to explain what they did, and it has to be believable. Evidence is really people. So you can do anything you want. You can do, like I've heard of investigations where police just pick a cell phone off the ground and they just page through the messages and take pictures of the camera. That's evidence. Even if you just look at it and you testify, I looked at it and saw it, that's evidence. The technical details of how you do it are not important. They're not fixed. You just have to be able to explain in court what you did and convince people. The humans are the evidence. That's why, in case focusing on the tool is kind of deceptive. A person who writes their own tools and uses Linux, I know some people do this, they're perfectly fine in court because they're able to explain it and convince people. It's not the quality of the tool, it's the quality of the person giving testimony that matters. So it's a whole government document about secure evidence handling, and this is quite useful. I remember Steve Haley, one of my forensic trainers, talked about this. There's like 10 rules of evidence, of how to collect computer evidence. And he said, if you obey these rules, you will always win, because I've never found any case where the other side actually did these 10 things. And I haven't put it in this course, but they're in the previous. They're very simple, like always put the evidence on an empty hard drive that has been zeroed. Work on a machine that is not connected to the internet, so there's no viruses on it, and things like that. Store it in a place where it won't be changed. Store an MD5 hash, record it. Very simple rules like that. And he said, people don't obey those rules, and I do, and that's why I win. So,
if the USB ports shut down, is there another way to transfer?
Yes, there's internal ports like SATA and stuff, and you can just take the hard drive out completely and move it. So there are other ways. And in instant response, you typically just do it over the network. You push code over the network and run code on the machine and then have the data come back off the network. Because you're typically not trying to get the entire hard drive.
So there's alternate interfaces?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. You could in principle even use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something. Anything that could move data could be used.
Have you ever had to move data in a different way?
Oh, sure, lots of things, small amounts, yeah. But the,
in any significant way?
Yeah. For example, we had a stolen Mac, and they wanted evidence off it, and I struggled a lot. There are some tools to image a Mac. I finally decided there was nothing I could do better than just run a bash script on it to collect the data and then copy it off with a file share.
Off what? To what?
That way I was able to get all the files that had changed after a certain time, and that I decided was the best I could do. So I mean, this is very much like instant response. You don't have to capture all the data. You figure out what part you want, and you get that data. That's often what you really do.
What interface to what interface did you use?
In that case, I just made it into a file, and I just copied the file off with, I think, a USB stick.
Over the internet?
No, just locally by plugging in a USB stick. But you could also do it over the internet. That would be all right too.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, these are fine. These are good questions. Anyway, so all right, so now you've got to have an internal repository of what your team has done. You'll have a ticketing system like you have for troubleshooting problems and IT issues. You keep track of what happens. You have some kind of local wiki or knowledge repository, so you've hopefully recorded what you did, and it can be used for future cases. Microsoft is an excellent example of this. If you go to the Microsoft knowledge base, they have detailed fixes for everything that can go wrong with Windows, and those are in fact from tech support claims. People pay Microsoft for tech support, and now they send crash dumps to Microsoft, which are analyzed where they get right to the bottom of it, and then they write up reports. These are these knowledge-based articles with these long numbers, thousands of them, with complete details of exactly how to fix this problem, this problem, and this problem. And only the most popular ones actually find their way into like service packs and patches. There's thousands of other specific problems where if you're running this kind of software on this hardware, you'll have this problem that's in the knowledge base, and they only apply it to certain systems because they're very good at keeping all this data. So I took XP tech support classes and got the certifications, and it was just amazing. If you learn how to properly search the Microsoft knowledge base, they have solutions for almost everything that will ever happen. If you search, they have detailed case histories because many companies pay the fee for all their machines to be fully supported. And so Microsoft archives all that and it can be found. And that's what you would like to have. Once you get very mature, you'll have internal documents of what you've done.
What's the search string?
The best search string is usually an error message exactly the way it appears. That's usually the best. Any attempt to describe it is usually a period, but if you can't do that, then you have to learn the official Microsoft words for everything, and not just guess. You have to use the official term. Like everything on the desktop has a particular name, like the taskbar and stuff, and you have to know the right words for everything. Microsoft is like a religion. You have to learn how to speak their language, or you won't be very successful with it.
It's not command, it's command.
Well, they have their command line. They have a couple of them.
No, the commandlet.
Command,
That's what they call commands in PowerShell.
Commandlet.
Yes.
Yes, because they are object-oriented. That's why, somebody in the other class said, why do you use Python for debugger? Why don't you use PowerShell? I said, that's a really good idea. Logically, in a Microsoft environment, you should be having PowerShell as the scripting language, not Python. It would probably work better. I don't know what WinDebug uses. It probably is not Python. It would be interesting to know what the scripting language. I don't know if there are such things as WinDebug extensions, but there might be, and they'll be written in some language, and it would be interesting to find out what it is.
How do you think you're going to be seeing when you start not remembering the scripts?
Oh, I already don't remember all the Microsoft terms. I haven't been certified Microsoft since Vista.
No, you're still young. But I'm wondering what age you think you're worried about. 80?
Yeah.
70?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not so much worried about age. It'll probably be politics in the college that drives me out. I don't think I will get to age to where I fail. I think the college will sink under me. We'll see.
Your brain's holding up good.
Well, I'll do something.
That is the most awesome compliment.
I mean, I could very easily just leave because there's something better to do, like working at Splunk or something. That's most likely
That's what I'm worried about.
There are better things to do. This place is kind of annoying after a while. Anyway, for time being, it's an okay job, but.
I'm breaking a few things on the rendering.
On what?
I'm breaking a few things on the coots.
Oh, good.
That actually looked like a real face thing, but now it's not.
Oh, yeah. Well, good. All right.
Did you break anything on Kahoot?
Oh, she's done it before. She's hacked Kahoot a few times. The simplest way is you just write a script to make like 1,000 names, and then each one of them automatically answers every question as fast as possible with every combination, so you win. She did that one time, and she probably could have other scripts too. Oh, you could totally hack Kahoot.
So why am I not reading this in Russian right now?
Well, it would be your machine setting.
Because you weren't good that day.
Yeah. All right, so let's give it a shot. I think. All right.
Oh, I've seen it in Arabic.
Well, yeah, I don't quite know how they get those pictures. She knows. Anyway. All right, network monitoring software. All right, it's fair cop. Security Onion does that with TCP dump, I think, and there's also Bro running and Suricata. There's several tools in Security Onion that monitor the live network.
Which one was the answer?
Security Onion. So what will protect data on a stolen laptop?
your big head out of the way, see, I might be able to see.
You can move over. I got to be somewhere.
Or just messing.
Yeah, but when I tried getting out of the way, and then I hit the power plug. Anyway, so that's full disk encryption is what protects it. This only protects data on a stolen laptop. There are people that talk about putting encryption on a server, and this makes no sense at all, because while the server is running, it's of course decrypting the hard drive. So network-based attacks while it's running, the encryption does nothing. It's only going to protect it when it's turned off and physically stolen, and that's not normally the threat model for a server. It is for a laptop or a cell phone.
Okay, Sam, that's just a checkbox, but how do you get to it?
Oh, well, each device has its own encryption option. iPhones are encrypted by default, and the latest Androids are if you get the expensive ones. And Macs have their own thing called File Vault, and PCs have whatever that PC one is called, BitLocker. They each have their own system. And they'll offer it, these days, they'll try and encourage you to turn it on. And that's really important because laptops get stolen all the time. All right. So which one prevents an email from being discoverable? All right, and that's the label. This is a different kind of risk. This is not a thief. Discoverable means you have to hand it to the other side in a lawsuit, and that's what the privileged label prevents you from having to do. If it's attorney-client privilege data, you do not have to hand it to the other side. And which one will collect information about running processes? Hmm? Okay. That's RAM capture. The RAM has all the data about the process. So it's all in there, and you can do it with tools. Sans has one we use in the other class. So anyway, I got Caitlin again, and Joe Chong again, and M. Hino. All right. So we got another section to go, and we're up to an hour. So let's take a break until like 7:15, and then we'll do the last bit. I'm going to pause the recording, but I'll leave the share going. Resume recording. All right. So anyway, let's do the last section here, and then I'll. All right. So then you got to prepare your infrastructure. We talked about the other parts of preparation.
Sam, this is not so technical as your other classes.
No, this one is not, and the one on Monday is not that technical either. Only two of them are hardly technical. Yeah, this is more like management. Both of them are more like management. Anyway, so here's your problem areas. You got your device configuration. This is a big one. You have your setup for routers and firewalls and so on. So you have to first, this is something I was talking to Kerry about before, asset identification. The first question is, what do you value and where is it? Like, how many copies are there of your all-important data and where is it? This is your first step. And then, of course, your hardware and everything else you have. And then you have your network segmentation, which we'll talk about. Several big companies got hacked, like a major certificate authority a few years ago, and it turned out they had a flat network. And this is ridiculous these days. If you have all your devices just connected on one network segment, then that's very dangerous. And it's not up to any modern standards. So we'll talk about this. So typically, you have critical systems with your all-important stuff.
But you don't segment them with routers anymore. You segment them within routers now, don't you?
Yeah, routers and switches. Yeah. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but not much detail here. Also firewalls. Lots of things can be used to segment. But anyway, so you have essential systems that have your most important data, but that's not usually where you get attacked. You usually get attacked on endpoint devices like laptops, because the normal way you get in is phishing. You send emails to people, you get somebody to click on a link. Now you've taken over one laptop, but it's usually not a very important laptop. It's usually not an administrator. It's just a random user who is dumb enough to run an attachment or click on a link. So you get in, and now the attacker will try to pivot from there and wander through the network and escalate their privileges. So anyway, you have to find out what you have. You have to have logs and antivirus and intrusion protection systems and all these things there. And in the project, you'll be setting these up for little test systems to see how they go. So there's this called host hardening. You don't not just install default systems, you make them stronger before you use them. And there are recommendations for all different kinds of systems that you can use, and many compliance regiments have these. So you should remove unnecessary services, remove default passwords, remove unnecessary applications, turn on a firewall, and that sort of thing. So then you have to have asset management. You should have records of all your devices, everything you should know, when it was bought, what version of everything is it running, where is it in the network, and you have to have a survey. You often do this with software that probes your network, but you have to know all your operating systems, all your servers and laptops, all your switches and wireless access points and firewalls, have a diagram, and then you have to have an inventory of all your software. Now, one area where people do this is just to pay the licensing fees. Microsoft will force you these days to have a licensed server that keeps track of all the Microsoft licenses, but also just for security. You should know all the applications that are running in your company and where they are. And that's why we were talking about this. If somebody installs unauthorized software on their device, you should know that and be able to block it from your domain controller or whatever central point of administration you have.
So Sam,
Yeah.
this seems like almost an impossible job.
It does. When I first heard about this, it sounds terrible. For small companies, it is impossible, but for large enterprises, they really do this.
Yourself up for just complete liability if you don't check all these check boxes?
Yes. What will happen is if you don't do all this stuff and then you get hacked, they will haul you in court and they will try to say you did not meet industry standards, and
So
you will
how
have
do you
to.
protect yourself. That was the.
Well, you will have to be able to. You have to be able to claim that you did protect it reasonably. So it will depend on what promises you made to people, and it will depend on the quality of your lawyer, and it will depend on how other people are in your.
How do you make promises that you can keep?
Well, it's in whatever your terms of service are. So, for example, if the college get hacked, students here can expect a certain. They stole all the student data, then the students could sue, and then they would say you didn't protect our data, and we would have to say that we did as well as other colleges. Then you say you meet industry standards, and it would. And in fact, this college is more secure than most, so I think we could make that argument. But that's what happens. You go to court, they will try to demand a bunch of money, and you will try to defend yourself. And nobody's perfect, but they will try to find that you did something ridiculously bad, and that makes you liable, and you'll try to prove that what you did is as good as anybody else does, and that makes you not liable. That's typically how it goes. It's the same thing if there's a fire or if there's slippery floor and people fall down. They'll say you're negligent, and you'd have the same defense. Well, we did reasonable things, and we did as good as we can. That's what the argument will be. That's why there was an interesting podcast I heard recently of a lawyer talking about there's a special law that protects social networks. It was designed to make the internet work. There's a special law that if you put up a social network like Facebook, then people post things that hurt people, you're not liable for that. You're not required to police the content. And now everyone is feeling very strongly that we do on Facebook to police the content because everybody's very mad about the political content on Facebook and also the offensive content. So the lawyer said we should just remove safe harbor entirely. There should be no special protection. This is called safe harbor. You have a safe harbor. If you put up a website and other people put stuff on it, you don't have to filter that. That's a special law that protects you from that, just for the internet. And the idea was to make it easy for internet to grow. But she says you should just repeal it entirely because anybody that has a website should just be treated like anybody that has a taxi cab. You provide a service. If somebody gets hurt, you have to explain whether that's your fault. And the same thing should be true of Facebook. You just provide a platform. If the users get hurt, you should have to justify it. You took reasonable precautions just like everybody else. But right now, websites have a special immunity. If they don't put the content up, but another user puts it up, that's not their fault. They're like a conduit in the middle. And I know Uber is trying to use this right now. San Francisco just passed a law that part-time workers must be given benefits if they are essential to your business. And Uber said, drivers are not essential to our business because their position is they are not in the service of providing rides. They're just a communications medium that people use to find rides and share rides. And from their point of view, the drivers are just customers, just like the people taking the rides. They're just providing the communication medium. And that would put them behind safe harbor, where anything that those people do is not their problem. They're just providing the communications. It's an interesting issue. Anyway, that's so You've got various ways to control what happens on your network. The most powerful, although the most difficult to manage, is whitelisting. What would be, if you really want to be safe, you should list all the approved applications and not let anything else run. That's what F-Secure will do by default if you install it on a laptop. Most people have abandoned that because it's too hard to keep track of all the version changes and updates that you have to do.
Well, that just answered my question.
Yeah.
How do you indemnify yourself?
Well, that's a legal issue. I mean, you indemnify yourself by meeting a certain standard and consulting with your legal team so you can defend yourself. But you know, you are at some risk anytime you do anything. If you hurt people, they can sue, and you will have to defend yourself in court. And everybody just has to have a legal team these days.
It seems, don't you just lock down a system so hard that you don't get sued?
No, there's no safety. If you make a computer usable at all, it can be hacked. So there is no zero risk, just like physically. If you have buildings and people are coming in, there's a chance that they will get hurt and end up suing you. There's no physical safety. There's no perfect safety anywhere. Not in the physical world, not in the cyber world. There's just a balance of risks.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. How have you kept, I'm assuming you've been sued.
No, I've never been sued. I'm not important about it. Oh, I just don't have any responsibilities. I mean, students, I guess, could sue me for flunking them or something. That hasn't happened. You know, I just haven't been in a position of where anybody would blame me for what happens to them. If I owned, the college gets sued all the time.
Well, you're getting close.
What's that?
You're getting close.
Nah. By being an employee, I'm too low level. I'm too unimportant to get sued. That's how I do it. If I was the boss of something.
You're so important in this industry.
Yeah, but I'm not the owner of a big thing. If I owned the college gets sued all the time. The college professors sue all the time for wrongful termination.
You're moving on to some other stuff.
Yeah, it might happen. Anyway, so
I have questions regarding road technology switch wireless access point.
Yeah.
I have like a similar issue regarding the Comcast. They use it like a wireless access, like a hotspot.
Yeah.
And we don't use it that much, but somebody seems router and modems as a hotspot, and our bill is just going up. Are they supposed to be doing that?
No. If typically you have a password into your wireless network to keep anybody else off, and they shouldn't be able to use it without that. That's the idea, because you wouldn't want them to, but although also your bill does not typically go up from anybody using your hotspot. You can use up to a certain amount, and then they just won't let it go any higher. It normally does not increase your bill.
We did not know that until they told us we need to put a password on the hotspots.
But even if you don't put a password on it and everybody's using it, it doesn't change your bill. You pay for a certain amount of speed, like 10 megabits, and if people use it up, it gets slow, but it doesn't increase your bill. It's not like water, where the more you use, the more you pay. A lot of people would like to make it that way. But the way it is now, you pay for a certain speed, and you can use all of that or only a part of that, and you'll pay the same bill. However, it's annoying because your stuff slows down because other people are using it, so most people prefer to put on a password to keep other people off. Anyway, so you've got management software that automatically puts out patches and checks for configuration errors. This is called continuous vulnerability monitoring. It's very important. This is something that happened at the college years ago. Well, the only shred of truth in the fake antivirus outbreak was we didn't have central management of our antivirus. So there was a lab where the machines were too old and slow, and the local administrator took the antivirus off to make the machines faster. And then they got infected, and we didn't know that because we didn't have central administration. You ought to have a central point of location like the domain controller that sends a probe and asks the machines, what version of antivirus do you have? Has it been updated? And you should know if they don't have the recommended antivirus.
Where's that software reside?
You put it on some central point. You could put it on a domain controller or another server, but you have some kind of a central agent, central server, which then probes the machines to make sure they're meeting your security policy. And that's what and that's your endpoint protection software. And you've got a lot of other applications running on your network. You should have all these things in control. You should know how many of these things are running and where they are in your network.
That's got to be a profession in itself.
It is. And that's,
What's that profession called?
Typically compliance. Compliance monitoring is the big thing. This is, if you want to meet a compliance standard, like you're going to deal with the federal government, then you must satisfy FedRAMP or any other standards.
Some guy with no girlfriends
Oh no, quite the opposite. This is actually a very interesting issue. We had this question of work-life balance. The people who have no life are the red team people, and the blue team people that deal with real ongoing attacks. They're like firemen. They're called in at midnight and all weekend because they got hacked or they're under attack. The compliance people get to go home at 5 because they don't have an emergency. They're not in direct combat. All they have to do is fill out boring reports, like audit reports every 90 days of all these things that have been tested. So it's like the HR or the tax people. They have a job that you can leave at 5 and go home. They're actually pretty relaxed. Compliance is a good place to go if you want to actually have a life.
So how much of a pay cut do you take with girlfriend and no girlfriend?
You typically will make more money in compliance. Well, in lower level compliance, not that much, but if you move up into management, you'll make more. It's hard to get people to go into compliance because it's not glamorous.
What's the differential in salary? 100K?
No, I think they're all similar. I think you start at about 100K on the red team or the blue team, and then you go up to your level. If you want real money, you become a developer. Software developers make the most money because they directly accomplish something valuable. The rest of these people are all support. But anyway, they're all good questions. So you've got passwords are a huge issue. Everybody is sick to death and fed up with passwords. It's driving us all nuts. Everybody has to remember dozens of them, and they keep forgetting them and resetting them and using stupid patterns and writing them down and losing them. It's driving us all mad. That's why Microsoft and the military and the federal government has all said they're just going to do away with passwords. Now, we could have like SSH certificates on things or use thumbprints or something, and they haven't quite decided on the best technique, but everybody agrees that passwords are driving us all nuts and they're very insecure. However, they're what you use almost all the time because it's cheaper to set up. So anyway, so you have to have, typically you have to have a password manager. Is the only way to do it. And now at your company, you have to have an enterprise level password manager, which is a huge problem. And most companies make horrible mistakes, like they hard code passwords into software. So now you can't change them because you can't find all the places they have to change. So one of the big steps as you gain any maturity beyond just an amateur level is you have to move past this and have central management of passwords. You'll have a credential server, and that is controlling all this. And that is a big step forward. So services are a huge issue. Your people have passwords, and you probably have some system of updating them and all that jazz, but you have a bunch of automatic services that log into a system to get email or to get logs or to update configurations, and they're all running in the background, and those services have service accounts to log in, and typically people forget about those, and so a lot of attackers will use the service account to hack in. And people typically don't understand how to change those credentials or anything. It's a common overlooked hole in security. Yeah.
No, I'm one of the included in that group.
Yeah. That's why a lot of these hacks come in this way.
Password management.
Yeah, password management is a huge problem. I see a question coming in here. Let me see what they're saying. All right. You know about WebAuthn? I don't know about it. Let me bring it up and see if I can find out anything. I'll get to you. Let me see this, because there are various services hoping to replace passwords. Let's see if I can somehow get down to my browser. WebAuthn. Well, they're from Dual Labs. I've heard of Dual Labs. A demo of their specification. The test. Oh yeah, the W3C specification. Yes, this is a plan to have some kind of token, and there are a lot of these. So I mean, this would be one of the ways to replace passwords or something. Yeah.
I've got a question. If somebody has a computer house, like this laptop right there, can somebody access the computer without knowing the password?
Well, is it turned on or turned off?
It's turned on.
If your computer is turned off, now, for example, cell phones and computers can be configured where there's no password. You just start them up, then you can get in. A lot of people use obvious guessable passwords, and then you can get in. But the most common problem is that there's just a defect in the software, so you can get in without a password, and especially Windows systems, that is very common. Like right now, if it has RDP on, you can get in with a lot of attacks. That's the problem. Those are unauthenticated code execution flaws, and they're very common. So unless you have everything fully updated, it is very often the case that if you turn it on, I can just connect over the network and get in. And if you have a human using it, and I can trick you into clicking on a link or something, then it gets very easy to get in.
I just have a question because like 2 weeks ago, my brother just like sit on my computers. In 10 minutes, he's using my computers.
Yeah, that's right. There's often ways in. Depending on what operating system you have.
Windows 10.
Yeah, I don't know how he got in. It's in, well, she might know some good tricks.
So there's a few big tricks that getting into the computer. So if you have physical access to the computer, it's over. You can get in really easily, especially if you're not using full disk encryption.
Because you boot from booting from a thumb drive. Yeah.
Yes, because he said my computer sucks. He just sit there 10 minutes and he already accessed my computer.
Yeah, he might have just booted from a third party disk. That's the easy way. But I think modern laptops do have encryption turned on.
No, I just refreshly format my computer so I can format fresh.
Oh, he reformatted.
No, I reformat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then I think she's right. Then he probably just booted from a thumb drive that you can easily get in. The password is like a TSA lock. You can totally bypass it.
He said that for 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, you can totally do that. Yeah. In fact, we do it in a hacking class. That's one technique. You can also do it with an install disk. If you haven't encrypted the hard drive, then the password is stored on the hard drive and I can just change it. That's essentially what it does. That's right. That's a very, yeah, that's the thing. Passwords are a lot less secure than people think they are. Anyway, so then you got metering, where you're keeping track of who's using software on your network for license compliance. And you have performance monitoring, of course, which is keeping track of your servers and other things to know if they're slowing down and you need to buy a faster server or something. And then you have error logs and access logs and firewalls and antivirus logs, and all these contain valuable information. And they should be going to a central log management facility like Splunk, where you can find out what's happening in your whole network. So there are centralized logging systems. ELK is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, and that is the open source central logging system, which is used by people who are very savvy with Linux. People pay for Splunk if they don't want to bother with that. And then they have a much friendlier interface that does essentially the same thing.
Sam, do you have any of the commercial sites?
Yeah, we got Splunk. Because Splunk's free version is good, and we're using it in the project. I've got several, you'll be setting up Splunk quite a bit. We're mostly going to focus on that. That's the Cadillac.
We used ArcSight when I was still in the Army. Is that being used at all?
Oh yeah, they're all big. They're all being used. Splunk is the best, but the others are basically the discount alternatives, and they all do more or less the same thing. They have some central point where you can see all the logs, and now you can find out what's happening. This turns out to be very essential in a modern network.
Splunk didn't exist when I was in the Signal Corps.
No, it's fairly new.
ArcSight.
Yes, yeah. The Splunk, I think, is it's the new startup, and it's very hot. But it's just an improvement on the earlier systems. So anyway, then you've got to retain your data, usually for a year, because you might have to research past incidents. And that's what PCI DSS requires. If you process credit cards, they're required to be retained for a year. And the other compliance standards have their own rules, which are, I imagine, similar.
Is that federal law?
These are not laws usually, although I think, but they are standards. And you have to meet a certain standard or other businesses will not do business with you. So for small businesses, you don't have to do it at all. But for big businesses, your partners will expect you to meet a certain standard. And if you don't meet it, then they'll shop somewhere else. So you sort of voluntarily choose.
It's more of a liability thing.
It's not a liability, it's a business customer. Like for example, the other people you talk to might want you to meet.
Liability and business are synonymous.
Well, yeah, but it's not exactly liability. If you want to deal with the DoD, for example, then you must meet certain federal standards, and they can't buy from you unless you meet them. So if you don't bring yourself up to that standard, you've lost a certain segment of customers. And most big companies are that way. They have their own policies, and they will not do business with you unless you meet a certain standard. So you can choose to be a small business and not be compliant with anything, and some people will do business with you, but the big companies won't touch you.
If you look at how Trump did his business, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's one, there's a certain, you limit your market when you're not compliant with any standards. That's why I've had students that say, my boss said we all must get CISSP by like next month. You must have certain certifications on your staff because there's a contract you could get, but they'll only let you have it if your staff has a certain level of training. And it's the same thing with these other standards. It's something you do in order to get a customer. Yeah.
So the lawsuit, you know, require 2 years, 1 year retention be enough?
1 year for what? To achieve a certain level of compliance?
Now, this is what this will
Hey,
pay.
more than 1 year. It would probably
Probably about
5 years.
getting sued, you know, some of the lawsuits, they come.
Oh, lawsuits can take years.
Yeah.
No, 1 year is too short.
Yeah. So did you get the answer? I'm not sure I understood the question.
So we pay the law paper for 1
Oh,
year.
oh yes. Well, the requirement for this is a year. You might want to retain it for longer. You're quite correct. But it's pretty expensive to retain it for too long. The requirement for this standard is a year. You might want to retain it even longer. You're right. Anyway, so on Windows, you got to log security related events like login, log off, creating new users, promoting users to administrator, launching new processes. And so you typically want to increase the logs. The default Microsoft event logs only go for, I think, 50 megabytes or 15 megabytes or something, because they're only there to like fix problems. But for security auditing, you want them to be much bigger. And of course, you really shouldn't be keeping them on the server. You should be forwarding them to a central log management system so they're all stored in one place. Because of course, your server might get hacked and erased, and you should have the logs stored somewhere more safely. Yeah?
Is there a write-only operating system for things like storing logs?
There are, like optical drives are write-only, and that's something people recommend sometimes, use write-only media.
Are there any operating systems specifically designed around write-only?
Not that I know of. I've heard people say use like burnable CDs and DVDs, but there probably are smarter systems.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it would probably be cheaper and more efficient if there's just an operating system that just wouldn't allow you to like.
It's a thought, but that's, I think, an old-fashioned hardware solution. I think the modern solution is to just put it in the cloud, where it's off premises. That's the simpler solution, but it's an interesting issue. And like I say, now in this era of ransomware, I'm kind of wishing we had that. I would like to have images of my cloud machines that could not be altered. Even if I try to log in and alter, I'd like to have a backup option that cannot be deleted for like 90 days or something. Then I'd feel a lot better. Then even if ransomware took over all my accounts, I wouldn't lose my backups. Right now, a smart ransomware could wipe out everything. It could wipe out the backups and everything. And I think almost everybody's in that position. It's disturbing. And the only thing that would be safe would be if I actually made an old-fashioned cold backup, or I plug in a USB drive and then disconnect it and put it on a shelf. That would be safe, but that's too much bother. I want something in the cloud that can be automatic. Anyway, so on Unix, you got to have accounting of all the same similar events, and you got to forward them to a central logging system through syslog or some other method. In Splunk, you put an agent on every device, and that forwards it over the network to a central location. And your applications all have logs. Your servers, your firewalls, your database, email, your DNS queries, all these things can be gathered from the applications, and you're going to need all that to trace through attacks in progress and after they've happened. If you encrypt your files, can they still be affected by ransomware? Yes, I think they could. For example, if I encrypt it with a password, the ransomware could have put another layer of encryption with another password I don't know, and it'd still be hosed. So I don't think encryption will protect you from ransomware. The only thing that will protect you from ransomware is if you can't write to the files, and that's what Windows 10 does. Windows 10 lets you define a folder and turn on ransomware protection, and now only a certain application is allowed to write into that folder. So if it's where I store my Word documents, only Word can write in there, and some other program that tries to write on top of the Word documents can't do it. And that would be good, but as far as I know, there's nothing like that for the cloud, and I wish there was. And if somebody wants to make a pile of money, all the cloud providers, in my opinion, should offer some ransomware protection service in the cloud, and everybody would immediately pay an extra $5 a month for that. I probably would. You know, you could.
$5 a month per what?
Well, per image or something. You know, they should figure it out.
How would you monetize it? Sam?
Oh, I would offer right now, protect your backups from ransomware. Pay this fee, and now what I would do, I just say now none of the backups can be erased for 90 days. That's it. And no matter what you do, that would be enough.
How much per day?
Well, my cloud provider is like 5 cents per gig per week or something. So it's not much. And they could make you pay an extra 10% or 20% on that. to have it not deleted for 90 days, and I think people would cheerfully pay for it. Nobody's doing it, but I think it's money on the table because everyone's terrified of ransomware these days. And if they offered any kind of service, even if it was expensive and not very good, people would probably get it because everybody's pretty terrified right now.
I think there's another way to crash the system. If you flood the there's a possibility flooding the Microsoft Reserve partition might also crash the system.
Oh, sure.
Microsoft Reserve partition, if you fill that system up, that's one way you could crash the system so they can't.
Sure. Sure, you probably could, but that's like reformatting the hard drive. I mean, there's a lot of ways to crash one system, but that usually isn't important because you typically have backups of that.
The other problem is that even if you don't have it under attack, you somehow you can accidentally flood the system because I don't know what logs are written to the MSR.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you have a properly designed network, it should be forwarding the logs to another server. The problem with ransomware is it doesn't affect just one machine. It logs in and affects all your cloud services and all your file shares and everything, and that's why it gets everything. It wipes out your whole business, and
even
that's.
For drives that are not mounted, if you have a virtual hard drive that's not mounted, it'll affect that too. If hard drive that's not mounted. I
don't know if it's physically disconnected, then you're okay. If it's not mounted, then you're probably okay, unless the ransomware author thought of mounting it. So realistically, so I think just mounted, yeah, I think. Yeah, that's essentially the same thing as an air gap. Yeah.
Oh, but you can still write it to the drive even if it's not mounted.
That's true. You can direct access it.
Yeah. And you know how, I guess.
Yeah, you can access it as a direct disk. You're right. Anyway, but this is an issue, and I think in practice, ransomware is written to attack the common services.
Yeah,
now I know Dropbox, I believe, what I've been told is Dropbox has 30 days of old versions. And I don't think you can erase them. So I would think, I haven't tested it, but I think if you put something in Dropbox, you can't delete it with ransomware. Your old versions would still be there, but I'm not sure of that. So that might be a simple solution. Anyway.
What do you mean by Dropbox? You cannot erase them. I erase them every time when I download stuff.
Yeah, but if you go on the server and log into Dropbox, you will find that the last 30 days of old versions are still there. Yeah, the old versions are kept on the server. That's true of Dropbox. I know cops, forensic analysts know this. If you are doing something bad on your machine and you delete the evidence, Dropbox still has the old evidence from 30 days back. This is a well-known factor, Fred. So that's one thing about it.
Do they charge you for it?
No, they do it by default, and many customers don't even know this. That's why it's a useful thing for forensic examiners to know. That's why Dropbox is really great for a viewpoint of the cops. It's keeping copies.
Can we get an old precedent that way?
What's that?
Can we get an old precedent that way?
If they use Dropbox and you're within 30 days, but probably not in that case. Anyway, all right, so you've got, of course, endpoint protection. You should be running antivirus or Carbon Black or something on all your endpoints, which is limiting the malware on the end devices and sending logs back. And you should configure it not to delete malware, but to quarantine it because you want to have copies of that malware to analyze. Because if something gets through, you want to compare it to other files and see where else it's been spreading. Yeah? What is Carbon Black?
Yeah.
Carbon Black is an enterprise class antivirus. So it's more than like McAfee or Norton. It's designed for a company to be distributed to every machine and then centrally managed. I think McAfee and Norton have their enterprise versions too that are similar, but Carbon Black is one of the industry leaders. A lot of big companies use it. And it's just a way, it has like firewall and antivirus and anti-spam and everything on the end devices, and it's controlled from a central location. So you can have a central log of all the incidents and you can push out updates and such. That's the point.
So
anyway.
What's trending right now? Before it used to be heuristic analysis was part of the antivirus system.
These days they all have some heuristic analysis, but in practice it's pretty weak. The one good thing though is heuristic analysis is pretty good against ransomware. That's why I really think within about a year, ransomware will be over because the defense is very simple. Ransomware does not act in a subtle way. It suddenly starts writing thousands of files. That's a really simple activity. I think every operating system should just have a rule that you can only write one file per second unless you pop up an administrator password or something. That would seem like the end of ransomware. It would be pretty easy to just put that in. And I think within a year, everyone's going to figure this out. Ransomware, that'd be heuristic detection. Then, of course, you have to write slow ransomware that takes like a week to encrypt all your files, but you could at least raise the bar. Anyway.
Heuristic is how.
Well, heuristic is just looking at the behavior of something.
It's the behavior of the algorithm, right?
Yeah, because most antivirus does signature detection, so it looks for one exact piece of malware. And if it's different, it won't catch it. But heuristic detection looks for suspicious behavior, and it'll catch any file that acts like that. And ransomware acts in a really suspicious way. So it should be pretty easy to just block it all.
How antiviruses work for detection of heuristics? Not
very much. The problem is there's nothing that viruses do that is easy to tell from legitimate software. So if the heuristic detection, although it's included, is usually very insensitive. Otherwise, you'd keep flagging on innocent events. That's the problem. Anyway, so you quarantine your malware so you can examine it. And of course, don't submit it directly to a vendor. Like Microsoft will say, please send this to us. VirusTotal will say, McAfee and Norton will try to send it to them. And you don't want to allow that, because if you have an advanced resistant threat attacker, they are not sending 1 million copies of the same file. They're sending a special file just to you to attack you. And if it gets sent to a cloud service, they will know they've been caught. So you want to capture a sample for your own team, but not send it to any network service that they can see. That's operational security. You don't want your attacker to know that you have captured their malware.
OPSEC.
Yeah, exactly. That's OPSEC. So then you got your investigative tools, like I say, Encase Enterprise and Access Data Enterprise, and there's Mandia tool. These are the big expensive tools that will manage all this for your whole network. These will investigate your whole network. You can analyze any system you want on your network and get copies of everything on the hard drive and running processes and list of all the files they've downloaded and emails and everything from a network level. And you can also write your own scripts to do all this. You can write bash scripts for Linux or PowerShell or Windows.
Are there networks anywhere that you're dealing with, or is everything cloud-based?
Oh, I'm mostly doing cloud-based these days. Yeah.
So is this stuff even valuable?
It is valuable for enterprises, not for me, but for an enterprise like the college. They have 10,000 desktops and laptops and everything, and they do have to manage it all. So, and if you're at a company, all those people are doing things like kindly customer data, and you have to be recording what's happening and noticing if they're doing the wrong thing.
So how much does this central management system cost? It's sitting on,
like I mentioned,
managing the cloud.
This one here, Encase Enterprise, I think is $100,000 to buy and like $20,000 a year or something. So they're not cheap. They're for big companies. You can make your own solutions though, and that can be as cheap as you want. But typically, custom software.
Is it an input solution?
No, this is
how they make their money, or they make it off of the.
No, this is investigative solution. This is for your investigative team. The endpoint solutions were up here, and those are much cheaper, of course. Like McAfee, it's like $30 per endpoint or something. Mm-hmm. But of course, you have a lot of endpoints. So this is the investigative system for your IR team and for your legal team. So here's things you do. You have to have a patching solution, making sure that all the updates are going out and that you're proving that, so you can have a compliance log proving it went out. You got to switch to two-factor authentication as soon as possible, because everyone has figured out the passwords are very easy to hack through, and you really should have a second factor like a hardware token or something. You don't let people have administrative access unless they really need it, because of course they will be installing unnecessary stuff and getting you in trouble. You have to have firewalls and antiviruses, and you have to stop using old stuff when it's out of date and no longer patched, like Windows XP. You have to knock it off and quit using it. Now, if you have stuff that is using old versions that can't be patched, which is fairly common for like high-end printers and stuff.
It's going to be personnel turnover.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
They're going to forget that this stuff is out of date.
Well, that's why you should have an inventory solution that monitors it. But you may very well have equipment that can't be patched that you want to keep using, like an expensive, fancy printer. And then what you do is you put something outside it to protect it, like a VPN concentrator, so that since it is vulnerable and you can't patch it, you limit its network access to only people you trust. That's a way you protect, because most people do have to continue using stuff that is vulnerable and can't be patched. And you have to put a layer of defense outside it. And so you have to have a configuration management system, so you know all the configurations for your routers and firewalls and everything, and you have that recorded somewhere. You can push out configs. Yeah.
For really secure networks, is there such a thing as like a access control list for IPs. So like this computer can only connect to like this computer, this computer.
Well, that's
Not
very
just, like,
common.
segmented, but
Yeah, that you can put that on routers and switches. That's commonly done there. And you can also configure servers to only accept connections from certain IPs. And that's commonly done.
is that done?
Yeah, that's an old-fashioned solution. That's commonly done. The reason why people don't like it is because IPs change. That's why that's not that popular. But for fixed IP devices, that's an option. The problem is it's fairly easy for the attacker to spoof that.
But even ACL has to be managed. You know?
That's right.
That's my point. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's why having a configuration management system would help automate that process. Yeah.
The fixed IP, you manually put it.
Yeah, that's the only ones you can trust. Yeah. And that's why having
How
something,
would the hackers spoof it?
well, you can send packets and you can lie about the IP as long as you don't need to see the response. So if it's TCP though, then you couldn't. Anyway, but you could do something like art poisoning to sneak things around. You know, it depends on the system. But all right, so then you consider application whitelisting. Like I say, this sounds great. If you had whitelisting and only approved things could run, that would end all the malware and everything. The problem is you have to keep that list of known good stuff updated. So pretty soon you're going to have some automatic way to update it, and then the bad guy can just add their stuff to the list. That's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. If your machines were just going to stay the same forever, this would work. But in fact, everybody is constantly adding new stuff and patching stuff and changing stuff all the time to where it drives you nuts. There's some military recommendations for standard configurations, and there's NSA has a bunch of guidance. So there are plenty of compliance standards and documents available to give you recommended settings. So like I say, you want to have good network segmentation. So here's an example of a modern network. You have the internet up here. Let me make it so I can point around. All right, so you have the internet up here. Then you have a border router. People come in through a certain layer of filtering here, and this will have a firewall on it. Then you have proxy servers here. And you go to a switch, you have firewalls here. Here's your web services. These are the public things that everybody should be able to get to, like your email and your website. So these are public things. You shouldn't have anything private on these because these are very likely to get hacked. This is what everybody can see. And then your stuff down here, like engineering and finance, should be behind more layers of security and segmented. So the finance is separate from engineering, separate from sales, separate from IT. This is the way the college is. This college has 100 VLANs.
So Sam, that's your vulnerability right there, is those routers.
Well,
the guys that come in this university right here,
well, everything
they get bought off.
Well, everything has vulnerabilities, but if your network is segmented, then you can contain the damage. If somebody hacks your web server, they aren't getting in your finance unless they accomplish another attack to get through another barrier. And that's the idea. It's just like you have internal walls and internal guards. If they get in the outer wall, they don't have access to everything. They only have part of it, and then they have more barriers. This way you have a chance of noticing it and fixing it before they get to the really important stuff. That's all it is. And this is what they call network segmentation. Yeah, that's the idea. So you should have controls, you should have proxies and traffic filtering and firewalls and authentication systems like VPNs, where they have to prove that they're an employee with the right authorization to get beyond this, just like you have in the physical world. And so Microsoft RPC is a famous problem. Microsoft wants to use this for controlling their servers, but it is fantastically unsafe. There's just an endless chain of RPC vulnerabilities. So this should not be exposed to the internet. People should have to prove that they're trusted before they get in there. And so here's details of the network diagram of the finance department. You've got personnel here, you've got database servers, and you have replication. Accountants coming in here, administrative systems. You know, this is the way it is. You have many different layers of many different devices, many different people at different layers.
How do you pull off the segmentation?
Well, you do it with virtual local area networks, VLANs on switches, and with routes on the routers, and with firewalls and VPN concentrators and such. There's quite a lot of devices you can use.
Dual brands can do it. Our dual brand router is like $100 done by Cisco, not Linksys Cisco, not Cisco.
Yeah, this
it
is
has a separate subnet you can set up in the router.
Yeah.
That's not specifically seen by the network that is the direct gateway.
Yeah, and here they did it the Cisco way.
Double netting.
Yeah, this is the standard Cisco recommendation. You get a higher multi-layer switch.
How do you know this?
Because I have one at home for $100.
Yeah, he's got the small business version. This is the big business version. You pay for a Cisco multi-layer switch, and this switch has the ability to separate it into different networks. That's what's recommended. Anyway, so then you got access control. You're going to have rules like people in the finance can get email. You connect to servers over HTTPS. You don't have any unencrypted traffic even in your local network. I think people are finally figuring this out. This is largely due to Snowden. Before the Snowden revelations, most people thought it was okay to have unencrypted traffic on their local network, and then Snowden revealed that the NSA was totally stealing that from all the companies. And people like me in security have been saying you should be encrypting your local traffic, and after Snowden leaked that, people finally started doing it. You should be using HTTPS and SFTP.
Was the NSA still there?
Yeah, absolutely. The NSA had hacked into Yahoo and everybody, and they had put and they were stealing the local traffic, which was unencrypted. That's how they were getting everybody's everything.
Without a warrant or without a warrant?
Without a warrant. And this was the big scandal about Snowden. The NSA was treating American companies as adversaries and attacking them and stealing their stuff. And they still are. They've been doing it all along, but it is. Well, they've been putting, what they would do is they would compromise something in here like the web server inside your network. And then they get all this unencrypted traffic because everybody thought it was okay to have unencrypted traffic inside their network. And Snowden had these slides that showed they had done this to Yahoo and Microsoft and all these big companies. So that scared people into encrypting their local traffic. Before this, it was considered a waste of time to encrypt your local traffic. And after this, we realized the NSA is stealing everything, and that was a big public scandal. Although, by the way, it doesn't make any sense.
What year are we talking?
Snowden, I think it was like 8 years ago when he revealed that.
Oh,
and that's what created a scandal which made everybody encrypt their traffic. But I must point out that this makes no sense at all. A lot of things in politics make no sense at all. You're still not hiding anything from the NSA. The NSA is getting everything. That is their whole job. And by the way, why does anybody care if the NSA gets it? They're the government. The government knows what you're doing. Your company doesn't need to hide anything from the NSA. The customers don't need to hide anything from the NSA. That's not in their threat model. You want to hide it from criminals, but it's politically undesirable. The customers are all afraid. They want you to tell them the NSA can't see it, which is a lie, and then they're happy. It's all garbage.
That's the other argument. The other argument is just because they have it, that doesn't mean they can use it unless they have a legitimate reason to use it.
That's right. No, that's the point. That's the point. The NSA is not interested in your purchases and prosecuting you. They're just looking for something like terrorists.
Well, they're not interested until they're interested.
I know, but the point is, and you want them to see it because you want them to actually stop terrorists and stuff. So, it's why, but anyway, the result was in the political world, everybody wanted to be able to say they had encrypted your stuff after this. So they did it, even though arguably it didn't really matter. Anyway.
What's the load factor after you encrypt the data on your network?
That was a big issue. People were afraid that going to encrypted protocols would cost more, but Google went to 100% encryption and it only increased the load by 1%. That's why everyone thought they'd have to buy. Yes. And now everyone thought it would be huge. You'd have to have twice as many servers. That's why nobody did it. But Google did it, and that's all it did. It turns out it doesn't really matter. The additional.
Google's 5.0, man.
Yeah, that's why.
Right now, the reason it doesn't matter, they're already at gigabit. Once you're at gigabit, it's not going to affect you as much as if you're at 100 megs.
Yeah, it turns
if
out.
you're at 100 megs, it's going to affect you by 10%.
That could be. Anyway, so there's the game. You have two-factor authentication now to your boxes, and your workstation should be limited. For example, this is something, that's what we're arguing about, that we workplace. If you go to Starbucks and you connect to their Wi-Fi network, you cannot get to other people's machines. You're not sharing, each one of you is on an isolated network. This is a mode you can turn on in enterprise class wireless access points called isolation mode. Every customer is on their own network and they cannot connect to somebody else's network. So if you left like a shared folder on or a shared webcam or something, it doesn't matter, nobody can see it. That's the way it should be. And you can certainly make it that way so that your end devices can't share. People shouldn't be sharing stuff from one end device to another. They should put it on the server where you can have it controlled. And that's the point. And this will also prevent infections from spreading so easily. They'd have to get to your server. Then you have
infection you talking about?
Someone can easily bring in malware. Like their laptop is infected at home, they bring it in, now they're infected. And if it's on a flat network like this room, then it'll affect all the other machines. But if you had Anyway, so black holes. The other big thing is there are IP addresses you're not using. You have a certain IP address range, and some of them are really going to servers and workstations, and there's IP addresses you're not using. So you should remove all the traffic going to those addresses, and you should be keeping it because you should log it, because that is a simple way to detect attackers. Attackers will scan your network trying to find all the devices. Your real customers and employees will not do that. They'll connect to the servers they know about. So if anybody is sending packets to the unused IP addresses, they're a bad guy. And that's an easy way to catch them. And honeypots are where you put up a deliberate server hoping to attract attacks. And this, most people think this is a waste of your time. The author of tech would say it's a total waste of your time to bother distracting attackers. The only way time this makes sense is if you're trying to capture malware samples because you're an antivirus company or something. But in general, it is not considered, most people don't think much of this. There's two highly controversial activities in network defense. One is honeypots to attract attackers, and another one is punching back to hurt the attackers, called hacking back. Both of these are considered crazy, and most professionals won't touch them. The one exception is honey tokens from Thinks Canary. Those are very good. They're not running servers typically. What they do is you put data, extra data in your databases, and extra files on your machines, and extra email addresses in your web pages that you're not using. And the point is, if somebody steals your stuff and starts using them, you can tell that happened. That is considered quite valuable. And they also have active honeypots you can put up where it'll have a server running, and if someone hacks in, it'll send a signal back to them and they can tell you've been hacked. That is something everybody should do. And there's even free canaries that, because most people get hacked and they never know it at all. The typical time to detect an attack is 270 days, and those are the people that ever find out. They only find out because the FBI comes and tells them, we found the criminals and we saw your data on their servers. So this is ridiculous. Everybody should be putting canary tokens on their servers so that when their data gets stolen, they will at least find out. It's free to do, but many people haven't thought it through. That's a simple defense.
But Sam, who's got servers anymore?
Well, everybody has data somewhere, even if the servers are in the cloud. You have a database full of customers and employees.
You can put a honeypot in the cloud?
You can put honey tokens on. You can, in principle, put honeypots on the cloud, but the thing I recommend is honey tokens. We bring these up. This Thingst, T-H-I-N-G-S-T, Thingst Canary, canary tokens. I must be spelling something wrong.
Your cloud server run the honeypot?
You could, but honeypots are generally too much bother and not worth it. But these tokens are not. The canary tokens here will do something. They'll make a web bug to put on a web page, a DNS name that you're not using, an email address, a Word document or PDF document. You put this thing on your network. You're not using it. But when somebody steals it and opens it, then it sends a signal back to their server and they know this has happened.
I'm confused.
Yeah. This is a simple way. You should make like these PDF documents.
What's your server, Sam?
I got a bunch of them. I got about 12.
Excuse me, that's Netscape right now on the first icon.
Okay.
Netscape, right?
What's that?
The icon at the other end.
The icon? Yeah, this is just a picture of Netscape. Yeah.
You still use it?
What's that?
You still use it?
No, that's out of date. Their icon is really old. But anyway, the simplest one to understand is an email address. You can go here and make an email address. It'll make one, and then they will listen for any email going to that address. You put this like in your database, and it just sits there. You're not using it. But if someone steals your data and then sends emails to the addresses, you'll know that happened.
You don't intercept it through the mail server?
That's what happens. These guys run a mail server, and when you make an address, they'll capture it. They'll generate one.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. It's free to you. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't use up much space. And now you'll know you got hacked, which is huge. Yeah.
So when you create an email address here, this website will track the email, but then the email is put in your
Yeah, you put it on your website or in your database someplace, and then you don't use it. It doesn't hurt you. But if a bad guy steals it, they'll then use it, and then you know. That's right. Yeah, it's a very smart idea. Anyway.
How about active emails?
What's that?
Email, right? The email you use right now, like Yahoo's.
Yeah, well, you have a special one that goes to their server.
What do you special?
It goes to a different domain to go back to them. Because of course you have to watch to see if email comes to it. And So they'll do that for
But where
free.
does it intercept it between the Yahoo server and his?
Oh, no, it'll be at a different domain, like thinks.com or something. I'm not quite sure how that works. I think some of them, it's domains under their control, because otherwise you would have to remember.
I understand this question. I don't know where the interception point is.
They don't intercept anything. They actually run a real email server to receive mail. And so when mail is sent, they get the mail. That's how they know it's been stolen.
Would the hacker figure out?
Here, let's make one.
Which website email thing is?
Yeah, let's see. Let me try this. If I do right this,
I'm trying to figure out.
reminder note when this is
Where the
to.
server gets intercepted.
Well, that's a good question. All right, so now I'm going. So here's my email address. Now I'm going to create my canary token. See, here's my canary token. That's the email address. It goes to canarytokens.org. So it goes to them. And when they get emails, they will then send it.
Where's your email address?
I put it in earlier. I put it in a test 12 of the Mailinator. But the point is, you give them an email address. They will create a unique address for you to put on your database. And when somebody sends email to this database, they will then send a notification to me saying you have been hacked. So they don't have to intercept anything. This address goes to their server. All they have to do is wait for the incoming mail.
So,
Yeah.
so when you put this one to your email server.
No, I just put this in my list of customers. I have a list of customers' email addresses, and I add this as one of my customers.
I'm still confused here. What's your email address that you got to intercept?
Nobody has to intercept anything. Nobody intercepts anything. I put this in as a customer in my database. I have a database of like 10,000 customers I'm selling things to, and I add another one with this address in it. I don't use it, so it doesn't hurt me any, but if someone steals my database and sends email to them, the email will go to this address. No email should ever go to this address. It's not used by anybody.
Who's the sender's name?
The sender could be anybody, it doesn't matter.
Your database include these address or the mail-related address.
The only reason I gave Mailinator is that's who they will notify when I get hacked. So so this,
You put these address.
you put this address in your customer, you make a fake customer at this address, and you don't use it.
Your customer profile.
Yeah, you put somebody in profile with this address, and then this email will, they're waiting for emails to come in, and no email should ever come to this address because it's not used by anybody real. And if an email ever comes to this address, they will then notify me at the address I filled in earlier saying you have been hacked. Somebody's sending.
But the hacker will know by looking at these.
They would. That's a weakness of the system. That's right. The hacker might know. So a smart hacker would know not to bother with this, but you'll only catch dumb hackers. That's true. That's true of any defense. Every defense only works against a certain kind of people.
Catching any Russians off of this.
Any Russians?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But anyway.
Well, the opposite could be true. They could try to send viruses to the email, and they're like, "Here, this is available. I'm used to send a virus."
Anyway, that's a good thing. So you also have to have documentation of your network and your configurations and all these things so you can find out what's happened. And you have to be logging everything. As we say, every device should be logging what it does and sending it to a central administrator a central system so you can see what's happening. And you should be logging DNS and DHCP. If you have DHCP addresses, you have to have logs because you'll have traffic and you don't know which device had that IP address unless you kept good DHCP logs. So we're down to the end of that. And I've got a, this thing, 3C. All right. All right. There we go.
Where do you transfer to get to Sri Lanka?
I forget.
Europe?
I'm near the other end. It's 14 hours on the first flight and 4 on the next one. So it's somewhere near the other end, but I forget where.
Well, that's helpful. Somewhere near the other end.
Yeah, that's all. I never remember these things. It'll be printed on a piece of paper for me to carry around tomorrow.
I'm guessing you're gonna transfer like in Italy.
I don't remember.
So when are you coming back?
Sunday. There's a chat message in here. If someone is just scraping data, people get a lot of spam. And yeah, that's right. That's the idea. They scrape data off somewhere, and that's how they get email addresses. And that's why you would put these fake email addresses somewhere, hoping they will scrape them, and you'll know.
You're gonna do that while you're in Sri Lanka?
Do what?
You're gonna protect your traffic? Or are you just gonna be in the clear?
Oh, well, all my protocols are encrypted these days. I don't think I use any plain text protocols anywhere. Most people don't. There's almost no plain text used anymore. It's pretty much out of date. I guess we can go. Looks like a bunch of people fell asleep, but we'll carry on with the survivors. What's that?
I can access it.
You can't access it. Off the internet?
Yes.
Oh.
It's an error again.
Huh. Well, that's weird. Well, carry on anyway. So, which one is hard to change? All right, the service accounts are the ones that are difficult to change and often a weak spot. Which one destroys evidence?
The first thing. Oh, that wasn't a choice.
Something number.
The antivirus deletes malware and that destroys evidence.
I guess.
Right, which log is essential if you want to identify systems from IP addresses?
Yes. I think sometimes.
As DHCP, that's what assigns a different address, and if you haven't got a log, you won't know who has that address today. All right, which is the dangerous Microsoft feature?
Microsoft.
We have to choose one.
Oh, okay, I see what this is about. RPC, we're talking huge problems. Lately, it's Blue Keep. Yes, you could argue they all are, but this one's even more dangerous than the others. All right, and which one reduces the risk from stolen passwords? That's, of course, two-factor authentication, so you need not only the password, but something else. So if a stolen password happens, they still have some other barrier. So this is, I assume, Caitlin, or else K is. Okay. You're the Chinese. Okay, you're the Chinese thing.
No, that's Russian.
Okay, and Joe Chong is here, and I don't know who K is.
Carla.
Is Carla? Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Well, good. Then I actually know, and you got the key. All right, so there's that. All right, so if there are any questions, send them in. If not, I'm going to stop the share, and I'll stick around if somebody wants help doing Splunk or something.
Excuse me, if I were in the middle of trying to access, I will be logged, right?
If you what?
I was trying to access the login, but it won't be.
Once he starts, you can't add in.
Yeah, once you start, you can't add in.
No,
but
it's the best, I cannot just go in there.
You can only do it during the actual game.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and here's another question coming in. Will CCSF students be able to access your talks? I do not know if they're going to record anything. They haven't said anything about that. I don't know. But I will be teaching classes from there by Zoom, just like this. So classes will meet next week as usual, and there'll be various volunteers will be opening this room and projecting if people want to come here, and I'll be connecting remotely. So hopefully I can carry on class as usual.
You're going to get the time right.
I'm hoping to. I will attempt to get the time right. Google should figure it out.
It might be like 4 in the morning.
It will be, I think, 12 hours. That's why I think I can do it. These classes will be in the middle of the night. What's that?
Is there a guest speaker coming Monday?
There is a guest speaker coming
Then you
Monday.
don't have to do your lecture, right? You just do
That's
it.
true, but I'll log in just to see what he's saying. All right.
Of course, monitoring.
Yep, yep.
Can you do it, or maybe you're gonna meet some beautiful girl in Sri Lanka, and it's gonna be like 3 in the morning,